First of all, I want to kind of talk about Twitter because there's a lot of places that'll say that you're the best person to follow in baseball. What is it about Twitter that you enjoy so much about it and the interaction?
I don't know. I feel like I just get it. It just kind of makes sense to me. Like I can see where a lot of the typical jokes are, and some of the more. I don't know. I follow a lot of comedians and love their stuff, so it's like easy. You just kind of. That's what I use Twitter for, is to be funny or to have humor sent to me. I think that's the greatest part of it. There's a bunch of cool interaction with fans. There's a lot of great stuff in that arena. I learned things that it would have taken me forever to find anywhere else without Twitter, but most of it is it's just comedy. I follow comedians. I follow people who just have funny accounts or whatever else, and so it just kind of it's a good outlet for every time I try and think of something stupid in my head or some sarcastic little thing that, like, what the hell, I'll just post this on Twitter and see the reaction. And so I think it just kind of, it works well for my personality, I guess.
What's the most surprising thing to you about it? I mean, you have to get tons of people talking to you. What's the best way to get a response from you? Like the other day, this is going to sound weird like I'm stalking you, which maybe borderline the case to get this, but with the guy that said, "Oh, out of everything I tweet, this is what I get a response to." Like,
right.
What's the best way to find you?
Usually the quickest way to get a response from me is if you're asking me a genuine question. I feel like there's a lot of people who just send out and it's just garbage over and over and over and over again, and then they get offended that you don't respond to them. Or I don't think that was even the case in that guy's case. It was just, this is what I've noticed. There's people that just constantly are looking for retweets and so on and so forth, and you don't get a response, and they think you're a dick. And usually just, I like good conversation. If I'm going to spend the time on Twitter, usually it's just kind of I'm sitting around watching TV or nothing else. There's a lot of people out there with different viewpoints than you, different ideas that are funny, and especially when it comes to baseball conversation, a lot of times it's just asking me a question. I know that last year there was a guy who's a huge Cubs fan and was very knowledgeable about pitch FX, and he started asking me if I was throwing my four-seamer less, and I thought, well, that was a really interesting question. And so since then we stayed in touch about different things, and I have him, he checks a lot of my outings, and we chat about, kind of stupid stuff that's going on, whether I threw more of one thing or less of one thing. And that's usually the quickest way. It's just something interesting, something that grabs your attention that they're very, if you read your mentions, they just kind of pop out.
Do you have a favorite Twitter moment that you've experienced, or a favorite tweet of yours, or interaction with somebody or something? Or are there too many to pick out one?
My favorite, two ways. Last year was talking with Jerry Seinfeld on there, or I sent him it was kind of basically tongue-in-cheek invitation to come hang out in the locker room when we were facing Detroit in the playoffs. And he responded that he couldn't make it, so on and so forth. And I thought that was cool, but then I don't really remember it all that well because I was still super concussed at that point. And so it's my favorite moment that I think I remember is basically how I'll label that.
Now, I'm sure the Twitter world is wondering, did you ever get that threesome right after the hospital?
Of course not. I went home and then, well, it certainly wasn't going to be then because, like I said, I was still super concussed, so I couldn't navigate the minefield of one human woman. I mean, you add a second in there, there was no chance. I just would have spun around and thrown up on myself and fallen asleep. I couldn't have handled anything at that point. So
you wouldn't do that normally?
I went home and I took a nap with my dog, and that's kind of how it went for a week.
Now, I'm sure you've told the story a million times about what happened, so I'm not going to ask specifically about that. But is there something that you learned from the line drive experience, or is that something that's like, well, what could I have possibly done? There's no learning experience. You just hope it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, move, I guess, is really...
Ask Mitch Williams.
Yeah, there's there's nothing to really learn, I guess, from it. It's I don't know. There's no real lesson to be taken away from it. I think the lesson is that, and I think it was kind of the one incident that really started pushing for it, where you realize there is an emphasis on this, that we have to find something for pitchers, some sort of a protection device, something that helps them, because eventually someone will die. I mean, there are spots on your head where they're just lights out spots that if you get hit there, even at a much, much, much lower velocity than really even a batted ball, that you can die. So there's a it's not a small chance, but if one of those balls happens to come back up the box and you've got a stadium full of people, or even, people on TV watching, and you see a pitcher drop to the mound and die, that's a horrific moment, and that will be terrible for the game of baseball in itself. So, kind of realizing how badly we need to do something about it, and then also having gone through the journey now and realizing how really close we are to one. And it's kind of, there's not one thing that I've learned, but just kind of seeing what this is like from the other side of the dugout, I guess.
Do you think that there will be some kind of device or equipment in your playing career, or is that something that'll happen?
Oh, I fully intend on wearing something by March. Had a really, really good meeting with a company recently, and this is kind of small details at this point, but they've got it. They've passed the early rounds of testing. They're turning it into essentially a regular hat. It's really good stuff, and it's just kind of hammering out the little details now, and then going into the final round of testing in early August. And if that passes, then send the hats out to me. There'll be one on my head for my next start. So they're coming. It's very, very, very close, but it's just not right here yet.
Is that something that baseball would have to approve of, or no?
It just has to pass baseball testing.
Okay.
Is what, and it's already blown way beyond what anybody expected for the first round of MLB testing. The thing with MLB testing, and it's why it's been such a hard problem to solve, is that MLB testing, whatever we wear has to hold up to balls going at 100 or over 100 miles an hour. Now, most balls off the bat don't get to that level, but you have to be able to protect at that level. For some reason, there's this humongous gap in between being able to stop an average batted ball of 87 miles an hour. The gap between 87 and 100 is extremely hard to cover and protect from, for some reason or another. So, while it's a lot of people there are a few products that at least can hold up to 87 miles an hour. Getting up to 100 to actually pass MLB's testing has proven pretty much impossible so far. And this is the first company that's really done it. And then they have their final round to find out exactly what they have in August. And MLB is completely on board and running it. And MLB really has done everything they possibly can do on this subject. So it looks like it's coming. It's getting better.
Now, you're very vocal about your opinion, and that's something that, A, a lot of athletes don't know how to do that the right way, and B, some don't want to say that. Whether, you said that you don't like games above 11 innings. Tonight with the Yankees might be a good example. They had, they got done at 1 and got to fly to Texas for a game tomorrow and stuff like that. That's probably just because they play so slow, but you've talked about the kiss cam. You're very opinionated, and it seems like you know how to share your opinions. Is that fair to say?
Probably. I think it's something I at least try to be good with. Like, if I'm going to post something controversial, or not even controversial, but something that people will need further explanation. I don't think you can just say what I said the other day and just leave it. People would misconstrue it, and so I stayed around for a couple hours. I happened to have nothing really going that day, and we were waiting to go to a 4th of July party. I was like, I'll answer everybody that kind of replies to me and have actually a good conversation about this. Just give people my side, and then when they tell me theirs, let them know, like, your side isn't wrong. No, there's no wrong side in this. It's just a personal opinion. just kind of how do you handle the follow up? I guess is you can say certain things, but if you just kind of run from it and then don't know how to back out of it, then you're screwed, or you have your nonsense. I got hacked, whatever that garbage is. It's to me, it's just kind of just now that's the time for interaction. If you say something baseball wise, and knowing that many people take it seriously, once you weed out the trolls, there's a million great responses and people who really do just want to talk baseball. And that's when you kind of sort through all the layers of Twitter, and that's when you really get to the good stuff for me.
Have you thought at all about life after baseball, being involved and opinionated in ways to change baseball? I mean, obviously some things are more important than others, but have you thought about being involved in baseball in some capacity afterwards, or are there other things after your career that you want to do?
I haven't narrowed it down to one thing. The broadcasting thing has always been something that interests me. But I don't know exactly where it interests me. I don't know that I could be a color man for a game, or at least for a team, a home team's broadcast where you're doing it 162 games a year and traveling and away from your family. That I feel would be tough. And then the idea of like studio shows and discussion shows, those things interest me depending on who you're with and if it's producer driven. If it's producer driven and people are telling you what you have to say and you have to be more emphatic based on this, that starts to get into an area with me that I kind of lose interest in. It's not that I don't like being told what to do, but I don't like being forced to do something that I don't want to do for the sake of success or whatever it is. And that kind of bugs me, and I think that's where we've kind of had this downfall in sports television, because with the embrace debate and all this nonsense, that you get so much of this people sticking to their guns on opinions that are really just flimsy and weak, and then we all sit here and wake up and we argue about it all morning long until the next news cycle starts, and nothing really comes of it. It's just talk, and that drives me nuts. I like the idea of serious baseball discussion where if you're paired with a hitter and the hitter's telling you, and this is just a studio show or a radio show, a hitter telling you what he's seeing, what he thinks is going to happen in this at bat, and the pitcher breaking it down from the other side. This is how I would attack this here. This is what I think this pitcher is doing. Look for this next pitch to be this, and then here's the explanation why. So I guess it'd be much more hardcore stuff than average viewers would be wanting to listen to. But that's at least what interests me now. In what arena or what, I have no idea.
So you're saying that sitting in between Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless isn't interesting you anytime soon?
It is not. The MLB Now with Brian Kenny. I watched one recently where Verducci was on with Brian Kenny, and it was actually, in terms of sports television, which I actually watch very little of now, outside of actual sporting events, that was like the first time I sat down and watched that whole show from beginning to end, and was just kind of captivated by it, because it was two smart baseball guys who still opposite viewpoints, but both are aware of the other one's viewpoints. So it was just kind of like a reasoned discussion. People, here's some pros and cons of this, here's some pros and cons of what I think. Obviously, he's got some points. It was just kind of good discussion. It was the stuff that if I was sitting somewhere at a bar and I heard two guys, quote unquote, arguing over something, that's what I'd be listening to. The other stuff is all fluff, and it's just, we're arguing for the sake because someone's telling us to argue. That's not anything. So that kind of stuff, that interests me much more than everything else.
Yeah. Now, jumping into your playing career a little bit, do you think the White Sox gave up on you early?
No. At the time, it feels like it felt like that. But I was 22, maybe you're 23, and you don't have any idea what's going on. But no, I can see. I mean, just from what they got back, obviously what Thanks did, it kind of validates the whole thing. I didn't think my career would go the way it did, at least in terms of injuries. But I think I don't know how anybody could really look back at that and say, boy, that was a bad trade on the White Sox part. I would have loved to have stayed there, but everything that's happened to me since then has been good, so it's hard for me to really have any animosity towards it.
Now, you were on the roster in 2005 when they won the World Series, correct?
Not on the playoff roster during it. I was kind of like, I traveled with the team. I was there. It was like, if something happens, this is the guy. But
Did you get a ring?
I did.
So what does that World Series ring mean to you? Because you weren't, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, directly involved, not being on the roster, not pitching in the games. What does that mean to you, and how does that?
It might be, if I don't get a chance to win one where I'm fully involved by the time my career is done, it'll probably be the first time that I'll take it. I've gone years without knowing where that ring is. My wife knows where it is, but I haven't kept in touch with it or seen it. And think about what it means. Like I know I pitched 60 innings that year in the regular season, and some of them were high leverage innings and high leverage starts as things start to get a little dicey in September. And that's something I'll always be proud of. Not actually pitching in the postseason kind of takes some of that luster away, but the more I actually do stop and think about it, it's such a team thing, and it's an organizational victory. It's not just the guys who started Game 4 or anything like that. It's everybody is involved in that. So I do have a sense of pride in that. But the ring, I find that means less to me just because it's those memories that mean something to me. The ring itself is just something shiny that I can look at or wear to a nightclub in Vegas. I can try and get a reservation or something. That's really. But when I retire, that the World Series ring will kind of be propped up and put in a display case, so it gets its proper place.
Now, as a Cubs fan, the only thing worse for me than 2003 was 2005 when the White Sox won the World Series. Talk about what your favorite part of that experience was.
Starting, in the playoffs.
Yeah. Because the playoff, you guys weren't really expected to do that, and then the way you went about it, pretty much dominating everybody.
Yeah, I think that my favorite thing was just watching the starters at that time doing what they were doing. It was kind of one of those like next level things of I mean, they had been good all year. Everything, it had been a good team all year, and I think it was probably mostly pitcher driven, but it was just kind of like it was just four guys who just sort of got to October, and were like, hang on guys, we got this. Paul and then Paul did Paul stuff, and
right.
I just kind of remember the atmosphere of the games and thinking how cool those were, especially the ones in Chicago where you're the World Series games. It's a place that hasn't won a World Series in forever. I grew up a diehard White Sox fan. There were just a lot of cool things about that for me, just being there and seeing that atmosphere. But it's more just the experience. I'm this young. I've done so little, and this is something that I get to be around and enjoy, and you feel like you don't even deserve it yet.
Now, what is it about Oakland that everyone jumpstarts their career there, and it's the nobodies, so to speak, that win all these games that aren't getting the big, huge contracts, and they all just come together and individually and team-wise have all the success?
I think it's to start. I think it's one of it is guys like Billy Beane and Moneyball gets talked about so often when you're finding undervalued assets, but you're finding guys that are very good at baseball, but we don't appreciate them for one reason or another, whether that's they haven't played enough, like a Brandon Moss, or we've never heard of them, like Cespedes. I think in my situation, I kind of fell off the map for a year. Texas had sent me down. I had done everything I needed to do in AAA. They just it wasn't interesting to them, and then going to winter ball, still throwing. So I was kind of a forgotten name. And to them, it was like, no, we see something there. This is this, and so you can go there, and we'll give you all the innings you need, and you get to go be successful. And there's a lot of guys like that where you kind of find retreads, you kind of find guys that other people have cast along, and it's kind of what AAA is made out of, guys that really should be getting chances somewhere, but Oakland is forced to do it because of financial reasons.
Now, in this situation, you were a big part of the team and part of the success, but once again, with the injury last year, you had to watch them in the playoffs. How frustrating was that?
It wasn't that frustrating because I was still really messed up. So I didn't have time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time I really got to sit back and watch games as a fan. I've been hurt umpteen times in my career, so I've done that before, but you're kind of bitter when you're watching those games and you're only half interested because you just want to be out there so bad. And watching those games last year, knowing I can't play, there's nothing I could do. I almost gave my life for this team. Like I feel like I'm here, I'm enjoying this, and in the atmosphere that they put on in Oakland for those games were just second to none. I think that might, right now, I'm hoping I have many more moments that'll surpass it. Right now, those two games in Oakland are the highlight of my professional baseball career. It's just watching the guys that we played with all year just playing so well, like the way they just gone through everything, watching the fans there. The fans are super passionate. They're just into it. When they're given a reason to go, they're just really good at it. And there were just moments there that kind of like, this is what you play for. This is next level. So it was, I actually enjoyed the hell out of the playoffs last year.
Being a former teammate of Chris Davis, is it fair for people to ask him to, well, I'll just say ask. Obviously, you're going to have people that will accuse everybody of anything, but is it fair for people to ask Chris Davis, are you taking steroids? When I don't know that, I guess I don't know that I'd ask him that, because what's he going to say? Yeah? But
right.
Is it
like the most simple, like, oh, shit, got me. I
Yeah.
said yes. I do think it's fair. I love Chris Davis to death. We're still good friends. I wish him nothing but the best, but I think those questions are still fair. And not because I think he's on them. I played with him for a number of years. I've seen him. This is what he is. This is Chris Davis. He's an absolute freak. He's just the guy that can lift more. Like, he's just stronger than you, and he's probably more athletic. He just kind of has all these gifts. But casual fans asking that question, I think, is validated by the last 15 years plus of baseball history. We kind of, every time we think we're past it now, we have drug testing. And then within a couple of years of drug testing, it comes out, well, there's this whole round of, there's a whole group in some city where, somewhere or another that are taking stuff that's undetectable. And then you go through this. And then even recently, it seems like, we're cleaning it out, and other than positive tests and whatever else. And then you find out about the biogenesis thing, so it creeps up again. You realize people are trying to get around it. And so it's kind of like each generation keeps letting down future generations just one at a time. It just slowly happens and rolls to where if the future generations are going to be held guilty to, mine and past generation sins, that's just kind of how it's going to have to be. And I think it's going to be one of our generations is going to have to be the one that says, listen, this changes. I think it's going to be the one that gets the penalties changed for steroids or any sort of performance-enhancing drug, and there's changes in them. And then once that happens, then you can start to really think, we have a clean game. This is clean. And if you make the penalties such that that you can give off that impression, then maybe in 3 years, when a Byron Buxton or someone comes through, everybody can say, no, he's doing it clean. Like, if he isn't failing these tests and nothing's happening, he's probably doing it clean. And even still, even if he isn't failing tests, he knows there's a chance he gets caught doing any of this. He's beyond screwed, so he's got to be clean. And then at that point, then you can stop asking. But if in 15 years we've done this and someone asks the next Chris Davis, well, then no, he doesn't have a right to do that. You're just being annoying. But there are solutions to this. We're just not using them, I don't think.
Right. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about Arizona, then I'll let you go. The Cubs, when you signed with Arizona, did the Cubs have interest in you? Did you talk with the Cubs at all?
We did. They ended up being the second team. It was kind of a race between the Diamondbacks and Cubs. It was the two of them at the end that I had to decide between.
And why Arizona?
Truthfully, it was just guaranteed money.
Yeah.
Contracts were very similar. Most of it was there. I love Chicago. I mean, the whole time the idea of even the Cubs being involved was exciting, just because hey, there's a chance I could maybe go back to Chicago. I had a lot of fun with that discussion, but in the end, it was just the full deal was guaranteed by Arizona, and I hate saying that it was a decision made by money, but it was because I didn't have a pull one way or the other. Chicago, I would love to have gone back to and been a part of that team, but Arizona at the same time, my family lives here. They're scattered all around the state. We have friends here. The Cahills are here. People that we knew. It was a comfortable transition. So it was when you combined all that on top of this money's guaranteed, at least, and after everything that happened last year, guaranteed money became a big deal. It was like, you know what, the decision I think is just kind of made itself. So it was a fun process to go through, but in the end, it kind of ended up being an easier decision.
We all like to say that, athletes are all in it for money, but I'm pretty sure if any of us had the option between guaranteed and not guaranteed, we couldn't really argue with your decision there.
Right. There's examples where I think fans are justified in saying they're all about the money and so on and so forth, but not when you're talking about my scale. I mean, it's a much smaller scale, and if you haven't made $100 million already, then this is still a good sized contract for you. This is important, and pretty much fans that say that are always fans that are biased because their team got shafted by a player or something. So they're not the ones using rationality or using anything other. They're just kind of throwing their own emotions out.
Now, Arizona, explain to me how this works. You've got a team that just traded your best player in Justin Upton in the offseason. Aaron Hill's been hurt. Martin Prado's only hitting like 250. You only have one starter with an ERA under 4, and you're in first place against the defending World Series champions in San Francisco, the billion-dollar Los Angeles Dodgers. How does that work?
I don't know. It's kind of hard. It's kind of fun to picture, and I think it's what's going to make the second half for this team so interesting is that we're going to have some work to do. If we see the way the Dodgers are playing now and have been playing recently, and we expect that to continue through the second half, the pace they're on, they're going to catch and pass us quickly. So we have to figure out how are we going to stay on a pace that gets us into the playoffs, keeps us in first place, keeps them at bay, and we're going to need a lot of guys in the second half to have big performances that might not have been there in the first. I think it's not hard to say that Parra, Goldie, and Corbin kind of carried us in the first half. And if in the second half those guys play well, and then also, Prado gets hot, Cody Ross gets hot, one more starter really kind of starts to click, get it going. It's not two more starters, and then you shore up a few things in the bullpen. At that point, then you have a team that can hold up to the Dodgers and can compete. But right now, the state that we're at kind of is a little difficult. But I still think I like our chances, and I do think that I have to be a big part of that coming back. If I can come back and throw well, then you've got another starter that, if I'm throwing well, that's there that you can rely upon, and then you can actually get into games where if you've got Goldie and Parra and some of those other guys hitting well, or somebody else kind of gets hot, then you've got a team.
Arizona has been rumored, along with everyone else in baseball, about Matt Garza, but do you think that you essentially can be like a trade deadline acquisition when you come back?
At least that's the way I look at it from my end. My end is get healthy, try and throw as well as I can, do what I can do. I know that my first half performance, before I got injured, was just it was just very weird. I didn't feel like I pitched as bad as the numbers showed, but I also didn't pitch great, and I felt like I had righted that ship up until the point where I got injured, and so which kind of slowed down any momentum there. But if I can get back to that level, then I'm the guy that they signed, and if I can go out and pitch at that level and do that for the next two months of the season, or 2.5 months, then I can be a valuable piece and be someone that's on par with what you'd be bringing it over in a trade, and you wouldn't have to pay someone else or give up any prospects. But I still understand the starter thing. That's the nature of the game. Like, if you don't know if I'm healthy or if I'm hurt or what you're doing, it makes it tougher. So me, I put the pressure on myself. That's my job in this second half is to be the trade that they needed to get. The starter that comes in, throws well, fortifies the rotation, and then hopefully good things come from that.
How would you pitch to Paul Goldschmidt?
Carefully. Paul Goldschmidt is getting on the level where you see Posey. There's not many of these guys, but they're there and they're scary as hell. They're guys like Posey, guys like Tulowitzki, and there's a few like Goldie is definitely in this category now. Braun, guys that can back the ball up so well that they don't have to be reactionary against you. It's like their eyes and mind work on a completely different speed than most other hitters in the game. And as tough as Major League hitters are to get out themselves, those guys being that much better is what's insane, because you can just see that it works slower for them. They already have natural strength. They can take advantage of mistakes, but even good pitches and bad pitches, they can differentiate between better than most can, and they can let the ball get deep, where if they have to hit the ball to the opposite side of the field, they can do it. They can do it with power. The way Buster Posey can hit balls out to center field with power is incredible, and Goldie does the same thing. It's kind of just scary stuff. So how I would pitch to Paul Goldschmidt, I don't know. The one thing actually I think that I've been most impressed playing with him is that his holes change all the time, and some guys, their hole is always the same hole. You can write a scouting report for player A, and then 3 years later come back and face him again and use that same scouting report and be successful. You know, he has a hole up and in or whatever else, and you'll see Goldie go through a week stretch where somebody's exploiting one of those holes, and then it's kind of like the next day that hole doesn't exist anymore. It's just covered up, and now it's somewhere else, and you're going to get beaten in for the next 3 to 4 days until someone else finds that hole again. And that's what the best ones do, is they're just good enough, they adjust fast enough. And so it's never like one just easy scouting report. You just have to hope that the video you've looked at the day before is the right video, and that's the hole you need to attack.
Now, my last question for you. You've got young pitching staff in Patrick Corbin, who's been outstanding, obviously, this year. Skaggs is pitched as well. Is it exciting to be around these young guys now that you're old as dirt and you're, 30? I mean, you're the veteran now. You're not the young guy. These are the young guys coming in. They're pitching well. What's your role with them? What's it like to be, Paul Goldschmidt, you have a young team. What's it like to be around them, to be in first place with these young guys where this is, their first taste in the major leagues and they're being this successful?
You know, it's a weird thing, and I kind of went through this in Oakland last year where I'm the veteran outside of Bartolo. Bartolo was off in his own planet. Because I was nearing 30, he's nearing 40, or he was 40, and doesn't speak English, so it was kind of hard to group that together. But being around guys like Jared Parker and Tommy Malone and Wright, not Wright, Griffin, you have these guys that are so young, they're just popping out of not even AAA, it's AA, drafted 2 years ago, whatever, and they just kind of get in and fit in seamlessly. And a lot of that is the Oakland clubhouse, but then I realized that last year is an anomaly. That's kind of what's happening now, is now Patrick Corbin and Tyler Skaggs come in, and you don't notice they're rookies. One, in no way does Corbin pitch like a rookie, but he doesn't have a lot of the same questions. He doesn't have the same, he doesn't make the same mistakes or do anything stupid. You don't have to get on him about his conditioning or working with him to maturity. It's like you almost get to a point where you want to go to him and start asking questions like, wait, what are you doing? What's happening here? And that's a different dynamic than I can remember seeing throughout the rest of my career. And this has just happened in the last 2 years, and I think a lot of this coincides with how much young talent we have in the game now, where guys are coming in, we're playing young guys earlier, and they're being taught to be big league ready earlier. You're not going to spend another year in AAA. Like if you come into AA or come into camp and you're good enough, you're going to make the team, and then you're a major leaguer. And guys are kind of adjusting to it much, much quicker, which is that's fun to watch.